shadow, cast no shadow. Clouds gather in the dimness. You can feel it, you can feel it, you can hear it, you can hear it. Dim the lights, cast no shadow. In the dead of night, black as thunder, on a journey with no end in sight, to the cold side of the dead eye, where the ink spills in the darkness. You can feel it, you can feel it, you can touch it, you can touch it. Not a glimmer, cast no shadow.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Stoa. Today we have Jasun Horsley with us. Jasun is an author of many books, including Seen and Not Seen, Confessions of a Movie Autist, Prisoner of Affinity, UFO, Social Engineering, and the Psychology of Fragmentation. His most recent one, 16 Maps of Hell, the unrevealing of Hollywood's superculture. So for those who don't know who Jasun is I would say it's a parapolitical analyst of sorts and a hell mapper. And if you don't know what either of those things are, you might find out today. And today's session, broadly speaking, is about having an understanding of hell and how that might give us a chance towards heaven, or at least that's what I think today's session is going to be about. I'll find out along with you. So I really recently discovered Jasun's work, and I quite like it. Very interesting, very original, something that the Stoa loves to host. So how today's going to work, I'm going to tag in Jasun in a moment, and he'll share his thoughts on today's theme about what mapping hell is and why that's important. And I imagine we'll have an exchange. And then if you have questions anytime, put them in the chat. I'll call on you. You can unmute yourself. And you can ask your question to Jasun. And this will be on YouTube. So if you don't want to be on YouTube, just indicate that in the chat and I'll read your question on your behalf. So that being said, Jasun, welcome to the Stoa.
Thanks, Peter. Good to be here. I'd like to ask those who don't have their cameras if they would like to turn their camera on, because currently I've got a bunch of black screens with names on, and it does help me to get a sense of who's there in terms of what I have to say or do. Peter said he didn't know exactly what today's talk would be about, and the same is true for me. I don't know exactly what it's going to be about either. Obviously I know what the description is, and I just did my best to not really think too much about what I might say today, because, well, that's kind of the theme of today, is to get out of the mind and into the body. So I can refer to my mind probably as well as the next guy, maybe even a bit better. I seem to have a bit of a reputation for that, but I'd really rather not. And it was at the last minute, practically, and the days leading up, that I wrote different copy for today that specifically correlated the mind with hell, or hell with the mind, and body with heaven, although I would say a more accurate equivalency would be the body is equivalent to earth, and the way out of hell and back to heaven is through connecting to earth. So it occurred to me, really pretty much close enough to the last minute, that I feel that this could be a way to begin this talk. Because again, spontaneity is absolutely the key. Like if I have anything to deliver and it's not coming up spontaneously, it's damaged goods, it's not fresh, it's been on the shelf far too long. You don't want to consume it. So, this was a couple of hours ago. I thought, in a way, and hopefully I'll be able to explain that way, me coming to this event is like volunteering to enter into a trap. Nothing personal to my host or to anyone here. This is all about me. But I'll try and explain what I mean by that, and I think it will give you some introduction to my work, my philosophy, to use a word that's probably appropriate in these parts, and the subject matter also, that of hell. When I was very young, bad things happened to me. Probably I'm not alone in that regard. I don't remember what they were. I'm probably not alone in that regard either. But the memories are stored in my body, the experience is in this body. It was, whatever happened to me happened to my body. And, I've been trying to resolve that ever since. And the way that, one of the things I've discovered over the years of my parapolitical research and meta-psychological approach to both the world's problems and my own, which are inseparable, I would say. I lost the thread there. Just give me a second. I definitely know where I was going. Interesting. Just sort of vanished like a drop of water on a hot frying pan. Anyway, but fortunately it's on topic, the mind. The mind is I can't even finish that sentence. It's an untrustworthy thing. It's not exactly the sentence I was hoping to deliver, but it's an amorphous thing. We don't even, you can get 100 philosophers in a room together, and you wouldn't get any of them to agree on what the mind is. They might agree if they were honest enough. I'm just going to hide the non-video participants because then I can see people more clearly if I can. You might get them to agree that they don't know what the mind is. Maybe. But probably not even that much. Anyway, I developed a prodigious intellect. Right? The mind is something that grows over time or configures itself over time, or like a bunch of snowflakes that come together to create a snowball. The conglomeration is created, a kind of internal egregore for the intellectuals among us, and we call that the identity. Not that they're exactly synonymous, but close enough for my purposes. The false identity, even. And often that kind of identity we develop is heavily invested in the intellect, but in some cases more than others. And in my case, I did develop prodigious intellectual capacities, and I was thinking before this event that I might say something like, my whole life has been leading to this one moment. And then it occurs to me, well, I could say the same to all of you. Your whole lives have been leading to this moment too, because, well, every moment your whole lives have led you to. But generally that saying has more, it's more portentous, it's significant, it suggests that it's a very significant moment. And for me, the reason I had that thought is that I started public speaking very, very young. I was actually taken to a radio station when I was about 8 with my stepfather, or 10 maybe, to talk about children's books, because my parents ran a children's bookstore, and I was very eloquent and articulate at a young age, so they knew that I would make a good impression and maybe help with their publicity, I don't know. But I remember doing it and enjoying it and getting a Frankenstein comic as a reward after doing it. And I just mentioned that anecdote in the context of the development of a prodigious intellect as a defense against terrible trauma, if that's not a tautology, which it is. And so I have a kind of social alter, which is very intellectually prodigious and has written books and done podcasts and has a lot of tricks in his bag. And although that helped me to navigate hell, it eventually became its own kind of hell. And so the reason I say that today is potentially a trap for me is that if I feel myself not able to cope and not able to really open up and connect, or if I feel that I'm not getting a reciprocal connection from the people here, then I might go into a deep childhood somatic affective memory of being that innocent, vulnerable infant who was unable to find loving connections, who was deeply wounded at a formative stage, even in the womb, and who developed these defenses, and still has to some extent, or still is imprisoned by that defense system, that self-care system. So the thing I was most concerned about today is that I would fall back on that social alter, that false identity, that weaponized intellect to get through this. And that would be sad and tragic for everyone concerned, but most of all for me. So that's my reason for being here. That's one of them. There'll be many reasons. Many reasons I'm here, and there'll be many reasons that you're here. And I did want to start with that as well. I say start, obviously I started 10 minutes ago, but all of this is kind of starting, hopefully not false starts. There's many different starts. Because, well, it's like an engine. You've just got to keep pumping the gas until it really turns, or keep pumping the accelerator until you know that it's really running. Why are you here? Ask yourself that non-rhetorically. Because there will be many reasons, and the deeper you go into them, the deeper you get. The closer we get to the real reason we're here. Now, I could say that the real reason that I'm here, I just developed a speech defect momentarily there. The real reason I'm here is to connect to all of you. And that, well, there's a whole deep context to that, which is we're in a crisis, folks. And whether you're Christian or not, we're more than on the edge of the apocalypse. So it really is time to get our souls together. And there's no other purpose or function worth pursuing right now. So I do have a higher, deeper purpose to this. And it's definitely not about socializing. But on the other hand, connecting to other souls, that's all that life has ever been about. So although the stakes are higher than ever before, well, that's good. That's potentially positive. We can be more motivated. However, I did say that, there are many reasons, and closer to just a more personal level, there's a reason for me here, which is to resolve something personally for myself, and hopefully theoretically, more than theoretically, that's true for some of you or all of you. You're here to resolve something, maybe something similar, a kind of fragmentation in your psyche that has turned heaven into hell. A mind that is configured in a certain way as like an electric fence of amnesia against trauma that keeps your conscious life force out of your body and descending into your body. The mind is like a ring pass knot, in the Kabbalistic phrase, but an electric fence again, or an impenetrable barrier. Consciousness cannot pass it without losing itself. So our life force, of course it goes into our body, because we would be dead if it didn't, but it can't go in and remain conscious, because as it tries to get past this trauma amnesia barrier of the mind behind the eyes, it loses consciousness and it becomes unconscious life force. I'm actually just making this up as I go, but hopefully there's some truth in it, and hopefully it's, I need to drink some water, but I'll just finish the sentence. Hopefully it's on topic in terms of the description of this event and how it is that mapping hell, which is trying to reapply the mind in such a way that it has a really useful function and not just as a distraction, but perhaps more importantly, but also congruently, that it is against all its best defenses, it's tuning into the reality of the body, because the body is where hell is currently, and the mind is responsible for that. I just have to drink some water. Because the body needs hydration, I recommend everyone, that you drink some water, maybe not right now, but soon, and just stay hydrated. It's very essential. Really simple things are the solution to our problem. Good water, good food, good land, good companionship, good pets, animals, and then all the rest can go. That would be hard for the mind. That's going to be an onerous task, because the mind does like to play with stuff, ideas and concepts and multi-mass media. But all that stuff will pass. Of course, the body will pass too, but hopefully not before we've made it all the way into it, all the way back into the body. And my understanding here, and I'm going to try and wind up, because that usually takes me quite a long time anyway. And I warm up, which might take 15 minutes, and then I start winding up, which might take another 15 minutes. My understanding is that, let me see if I can find a way to say this that's new. The body has become, well, I can speak personally, for most of my life, most of my adult life, from my late teens to my mid to late 40s, so that's, what is that, that's 30 years, I had something that was at some point diagnosed as chronic fatigue syndrome. And one of the reasons I finally took that diagnosis, beside the fact that it allowed me to be on disability support in London and not have to pretend to be looking for a job, was that I had body pains. That was really central to it. And at a certain point I found out, chronic fatigue syndrome includes these body pains. And they were the most mysterious thing. And I could spend a long time trying to communicate what that was like. But, so body pains doesn't really do it, but I was just in the most intense discomfort under the skin and in the nervous system and the fascia of the body. Horrible, terrible feeling. It reminds me now, as before, of those characters in the movie Alien. I think it was an edited scene, who end up, they're captured by the xenomorph alien, but they're not killed. They're just kept in its lair, cocoon, so that they can be used as host bodies to incubate, new aliens. And they're just all wrapped up in the gunk of the xenomorph. That's what it would feel like under my skin, this sickly, malevolent, darkly insidious infiltration. And anyway, I thought, well, I'll take the diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome because it kind of fits, and it's just this mysterious pain all through the body. And I'm just mentioning it now because just to give the backstory on how it was that 30 years of my life or more, for me the body was a hellish place to be, and I would do anything not to be there. And it's a bit strangely circular, because this discomfort pulled my attention into my body. I could hardly think about anything else, but at the same time it made me want to do anything not to have to put my attention on my body. So that peculiar tension, I'm not sure if I can intellectually or unpack that in a clever way, so I won't even try. I'll just march bravely on to the main summing up point, which is that I did understand fairly early on that whatever was going on with my body, my mind was the primary culprit. And I might even attempt to explain that in a metaphysical sense that's maybe not parapsychological, because that has a different meaning, but metapsychological, that many years from a young age, when I first discovered comic books and movies, of thinking in a certain way to try and escape and dissociate from the traumatic hell reality that I was born into, created these clusters of thoughts, like mini egregores, as I said. And those clusters, well, they have to install themselves somewhere. They installed themselves in the body. And it's like like thoughts as sort of semi-sentient things wrap their cores like little tiny octopi around the fascia of my nervous system, and they fed upon the life force. And so by the time I was 18, 19, when the sickness really began, my whole body was colonized by these dark, quasi-sentient squid entities, like in the movie The Matrix. Getting some internal quivers now. And so, of course, the last thing I wanted to do, or was even able to do, was be in my body. So it was kind of a vicious circle. I was more and more pushed into my mind, and I ended up creating a turbo boosted false identity. But I won't go into that because that will take too much time. And then it was in my 40s I met David Shana, who happens to be here today. And also I met my wife, and those two things were obviously not coincidental, and I'd say they were equally central to the change of trajectory that occurred. I began to see through my crucial fictions, and I began to recognize that I'd been trying to use my mind to create a perfect counterfeit of enlightenment or of truth or of consciousness, and take refuge in it, and it just wasn't working. It was never going to work. So I had to stop, and I had to, figuratively speaking, get down on my knees. Well, actually I got down on my knees many times before that, because this sickness would bring me to my knees, and repent. And pray for deliverance. And you could say I've kind of been in that position ever since. But it's not what it sounds like, or it doesn't look like it sounds like. It's actually about becoming an upright man and walking in the way of the Lord. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I should fear no evil. To walk out of hell and to allow one's awareness to begin to see the phantoms and the demons and the chimera and the illusions and the fond delusions of the mind. That was too poetic now, I think I've lost the thread. So that the mind those snowballs of mind begin to dissolve, and then there's nowhere else to go but into the body and into the trauma. That is to be willing, ready and able to go all the way into the deepest last circle of hell in order to find the way through and out. It's no picnic. It's really, I mean, our whole society and culture is configured to prevent that from happening, and we are to a large extent products of that, complicit with that. So hopefully I can kind of gracefully bring that to a symbiosis now, and a winding up between, I've focused on the inner and the personal, even though Peter introduced me as a parapolitical researcher. I haven't said anything about parapolitics, because all that came later. I mean, it won't be hard for some of you to join the dots. If this was my formative experience, and then I became a spiritual seeker, quasi-shamanic, aspirant, sorcerer, what have you, I was naturally drawn to try and understand the hellish nature of the world, because that was what corresponded not just with my trauma but with my inner reality. Like I needed we all need mirrors to see the state of our psyches, because you can't look at your own eyeballs. You can't use your conscious awareness to visit or explore your unconscious. As I said, we go unconscious as soon as we get too close to unconsciousness. It's tautological, isn't it? So looking at the world over the years, I began to realize, well, wait, something in me is compelling me to look and to research and to map hell. What is it? And that was when I started to see that I was trying to clear the lens of the mirror, the surface of the mirror of the gunk, so I could see more clearly my own psyche. And in this case, parapolitical research, mapping hell, is to clear away the candy-coated gunk of the hallmark smoke screen, the wool that's pulled over our eyes. I got a bit distracted there because I was thinking about how it is today that we've got sugar-coated gene serums that are supposedly going to save us. The whole world now is geared towards some kind of scientific magical solution, but it's always been that way to one degree or another. And just the irony that actually the gunk I was trying to clean away was a fake positivity, a fake affirmation, everything will be alright, a fake spirituality. Because you can't resolve deep ancestral wounding through affirmations. And an affirmation is completely meaningless if you haven't stared full on into what needs to be counteracted with the affirmation. An affirmation for me isn't, oh, life is good, life is wonderful, it's all getting better. An affirmation is the truth, which is that we're so profoundly traumatized and damaged as a species by a deep, mysterious, metaphysical form of organized malevolence that's been in the human nervous system since the Garden of Eden. I forgot how to finish the sentence, that we can't even think or function straight anyway. And seeing that reality and saying, nonetheless, I will get out of bed and I will open my heart and love life, because there is life in me, without any illusions being necessary to do that. It's like finding something in me that's actually more than okay with seeing the truth of our society and of our own psychological wounding. It's more than okay with it. It feels joy to see that, because it's true, because it's real. There's a part in us that only thrives on, is only nourished by truth and by reality. And that's the part that will save us, and that's the part that has to be salvaged from the wreckage of society, civilization, and the human species, even. So there's a willingness. I mean, the truth shall set you free, said somebody, quoted, and there's a kind of proviso to that, because only if you're willing to not turn away from it, because most people turn away from the truth. And the problem with that is that the truth is on every side, and so if you're turning away from a really painful truth, you're actually preventing yourself from meeting it, and unless you meet it, you can't get to know it, and you can't find out what it's there for. I see this questions coming up in the chat. I kind of assumed that I would talk for a while and then we would just open it up to spoken questions. So although that wasn't quite as punchy a wind up as I was hoping for, I still think it was good enough. So I'm willing to leave it there with the monologues and just see where we go next.
So I'll yeah, if anyone has questions, put them in the chat. We probably won't get to all of them, and we'll get to them in order. And I'll take your lead, Jason, and speak to life and through life, and start with an appreciation of how you open the space. And it reminds me of a conversation I had yesterday. Someone was basically interviewing me, and I gave my whole biography, and just like, I don't know, right here, being here right now, I don't know why I'm here. It's like such a fucking mystery. And then just building a relationship with that mystery, and then seeing the mystery in someone else, and then seeing the mystery in between, and then lovingly speaking to that. And that's sort of basically what I guess is being cultivated here at the Stoa, that capacity. And then you ask why you're here, and that kind of brought the question, why did I invite you here? Yeah, and I think I sent you some of my writings on this, and I'm sure people at the Stoa know, but I've had encounters with really dark forces that resided in my body. And it's like, once I think I handled it well enough, but once you taste that or get it, it touches you, then you realize forces will exist outside your body as well, and perhaps they might be well organized. And maybe this maps over to your paranoid awareness term that you like to use. And I had a conversation with someone who had real good spiritual capacities, and she told me, people at the Stoa might know her, and she told me that, yeah, there's forces of dark and light are really going at it right now, and the forces of dark are quite organized, and the forces of light need to start getting organized. And there's something about your work that kind of like caught me in the sense that, it makes sense given your personal experience, is that like almost you're a node of that really experienced the darkness and went within it and sat in it, and could be sort of like a way to express it to people in such a way that people can have an understanding to it, because there's almost like a hell blindness in our society right now. So I don't know if I have any questions to tease out there, but I thought I'd just do that opening share with you before we pivot to the questions. And if you have anything that came up for you that you'd like to respond to, I'll hand it over to you.
Nothing's in my mind right this second, so I'd say let's just jump into the mosh pit.
All right. Well, let me feel into what question would be the best one in the mosh pit. That is Zoom. Yeah, let's go to Stephen Bliss, if you can ask your question.
Sure. I just wanted to ask how you define heaven and hell.
Well, actually, I quite like that question, because I was going to ask you people at the beginning, so now I can maybe do that. I was going to ask for show of hands, another reason for people to have their cameras on. Well, I'll keep on slightly, I'm going to keep more on topic than I was going to be, because I was going to ask about Satan, actually. I was going to lead with Satan, because I thought that would be a firecracker of a start. And I was going to ask people if the word Satan meant anything to them, or if they felt it pointed to anything real. So, but I'll just say about hell, like, who here feels that hell has some sort of real meaning to them? Right, so I don't know about the, of course, people with their cameras off, but it didn't seem like many. I mean, it seemed like less than half, and that's obviously significant. And I presume, although it's always risky to presume, but I presume that this would have to do with people associating the word with Christian belief. and not wanting to take on that baggage. So, anyway, I mean, shall I define hell? I was wondering if it's helpful to... I might have to go into my mind to do that. I'm just thinking if that's all right with everyone. Well, okay, so I'll just say what came to me there. I'd say hell is unreality. Hell is a disconnect from reality. And I'd say by definition, and this is my one problem, and it's not a small one, with theology around hell. It's not in the Bible, this whatever idea. The idea that hell is eternal, or could ever be eternal, which is sort of congruent with the idea that it's punishment rather than purgation. That to me is a hellish idea, and that leads to kind of dementia. And I do wonder if somebody believes that, they might create that reality for them in some sense. But still, the point I was trying to get to was a positive one, which is that if hell is a kind of permanent disconnect from reality, I mean, it's not permanent, but inescapable, one that we can't get free of, it can't go on forever, because reality always triumphs in the end. But I do think that we're living in a world that's configured towards maintaining that disconnect for as long as possible, trying to maintain it indefinitely. So yeah, I mean that's what I'm going to say for now, because it keeps it on theme with hell being trapped in the mind and not being able to get to the body. And that makes it more socio-politically and culturally relevant, is that we are in a time in history where that kind of movement or trajectory is being heavily pushed and promoted. And of course we're doing this on Zoom here, that lets you know how prevalent that is. And of course with the last 18 months there's been a whole other level now to the social engineering, which is that many people can't connect and meet except through the technology, which is by its nature disembodying. The medium is the message. So if when the cure is worse than the condition it's supposed to cure, then you know the end is nigh. It was a kind of punchy line and didn't necessarily sum up the point that I was trying to make about hell. But anyway, I'll just leave it there, because I definitely don't want to over-define something that in a certain sense is best left undefined, I think.
Any follow-up question or share, Stephen?
No, thanks.
The brief share that on my end is I feel the most embodied I've ever felt in my life after COVID came online, given a space like this, Stoa afforded. So that might be an interesting thread to touch on in a future session. Isaiah, you had a question.
Yeah, hi. I guess when I look at the world, I think that, and like listening to you talk, Jason, it sounds like this heaven and hell, a lot of it comes from how we consider the nature of our own mortality. And so I kind of want to just throw that out as like, do you think that heaven and hell and how it's created, is that related to how we relate to or think about the inevitability of our own deaths?
Well, they certainly imply an afterlife, don't they, heaven and hell, although I've been using them in the context of this life. I believe that we have created a hell on earth, and in a certain sense That's probably the only real kind of hell that can exist, maybe. But well, I'm wondering if I can answer your question, if I need to go around the houses again. I think something in me wants to share this dream I had. And in the dream I was, as consciousness, which is one is in a dream generally, but I was very conscious. I wasn't just passively watching a dream, it was just like, this is my consciousness now, which is going into an experience. And I was aware that I was going to have to, as consciousness, I was going to have to connect to the human energy field in a way that was, that I hadn't done before. And that it would entail, over time, it would entail re-experiencing all of the terrible things that have happened to humanity over thousands of years. So every unimaginably horrible thing that's ever happened, the rapes, the tortures, the murders, the wars, and so on, that was all somehow hanging around in the Akashic records or something, and I was going to have to just go through this massive filing system as consciousness and re-experience it. And needless to say, this was a pretty horrific prospect, but I didn't seem to have any choice in that, so it was really, okay, just steel yourself, young man. I wasn't really young. And let's get started. Getting a bit of stomachache just recounting this. But here, the reason I recount this is I had this insight as I was agreeing to this terrible task. I don't know if I was agreeing with it, I just was acknowledging that it was unavoidable. That hell had been created, that this was only necessary because we as a species had disowned all of this stuff, because we'd been trying to create heaven. We'd been holding on to all of our good memories. This was after my cat died. And that was very, very painful. We were deeply connected. And it was the same night that he visited me after he died. And he came in the form of a cat, and he was on the end of the bed. And I could feel the weight of him. But he was chiding me. His consciousness was chiding me because I had made him resume the form of a cat because of my attachment to him as a cat. But he wasn't a cat anymore. So it was like, I have to put this coat on again just to comfort you in your grief, kind of thing. But it was loving. He was just making fun of me. It wasn't too onerous. And so that was a lesson in itself, that, of attachment. And then the hell dream came, and I understood, that desire in me to hold on to the memory of something I loved like that, that's what creates hell. Because if we try and isolate all our positive memories and keep them in a place somewhere where we can revisit them, what happens to all the bad stuff? Right? It can't get integrated, it can't get dissolved or resolved with the good. The good stays over there, the bad's over here, and well, now it's just like frozen in amber. Right, so then I think, if we do that over thousands of years, then hell does become theoretically real, or relatively real. That there really is a metaphysical realm where all those memories are just held in quarantine because we didn't want to process them, we didn't want to deal with them, or our ancestors didn't. And so then death does become terrifying. And even at an individual level, if we do that at an individual level and we push into unconsciousness all the bad stuff, well, that's the totality of our life, of our sentient experience. So it's got to be absorbed and integrated at some point. And if it's not in life, then it's in death. So yeah, that's my answer, that if we haven't lived, then we fear death, and rightly, because if we haven't lived, then we're not ready to die. Simple thing, but there's a weird sort of symmetry here, because if we fear death, we can't live. We won't live, because to fully live is to fully know death, to know that we will die. Just as to fully love is to know that we will lose the object of our love. So this is back to my opening intro about the defended intellectual identity. And yes, the mind cannot comprehend death, can only see it as something terrible, and configures itself as a defense against that awareness. The body, it's paradoxical, but the body can know death through life, I feel, even though it's the body that dies, the body is compatible with death somehow. I mean, we have an instinctive response to the reality of death, and I think that and this would bring us to the reality of the question of the soul, that although the body has fear reactions to death because that's adrenaline and that's part of our survival hardware, the life force, which is it's not, wouldn't say it's synonymous with the soul, but it's much more closely aligned with what we might refer to or call the soul. The life force doesn't know death. Like when the body dies, the life force leaves the body, but it doesn't die. Right? The life can't die. By definition, bodies can die, and we are at a point in time where the bodies are becoming host to a kind of technology or a kind of dark intelligence that might make it impossible for the life force to enter into them. But maybe that's a digression from this point. It probably is actually, but I just thought I'd throw that in there in terms of that there are much wider stakes than the fate of our own soul or the state of our own afterlife here. And we're part of a collective, and anyway, I don't think I can round that up gracefully, but it was a good question. Thank you.
Any follow-up shares, Isaias?
No, I think that he covered a lot of things consistently. Yeah. No, thank you.
Thank you, Isaias. So we'll take in Kim next, and this might be the last question.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for coming here today. I feel you quite vulnerably sharing with us. The sensation I have is that you carry your heart in your hands where you go so that people can fully see it. And the question I had for you is, you shared at the beginning, and I want to make sure I understood you correctly. I feel like I heard you say that you came here today to heal something. You implied we're all here to heal something, but I wondered if you wanted to share what that was, and perhaps we can witness that with you.
Well, thanks, Kim. I mean, that's frontline stuff. Whew. I mean, one of the reasons that because I don't get nervous about public speaking anymore, really, but I was a little bit nervous today, and so I was looking at that, and one of the reasons that was fairly obvious was why I'm not going to know the people, and I don't know how they perceive me. And so, as I said at the beginning, that might cause this fragment of me that has compensated for a feeling of heartbreak, of not being able to connect or feel safe or feel loved, to jump in to try and save me from that distress. And that's the thing I didn't want to happen. But anyway, I mentioned that. I realise it's relevant to your question, but I just mentioned it because the kind of healing that you're talking about is something I'm involved with online through Zoom, because everything's on Zoom now, with these affinity groups, and that's with participants who have been regularly participating in this work. A lot of it's around Dave Oshana, who's going to be talking tomorrow, and some of it's around what I do. So yeah, I certainly wasn't thinking that it would become actually interactive healing work today, just that everything that happens for a reason. That's a terrible cliche. Everything that I find myself engaging with, I'm aware that there's going to be, as I said, moments have been leading up to this, and there's a reason why it's happening right now at this particular time. So in this past week, there's been a focus, well, there was a focus on a recent Devasana event about the sub-persona, and which I also call social alters. If you think of what's called dissociative identity disorder, that my experience, again, I had this in a dreaming state, very palpably, very viscerally, that I woke up and I became aware that I wasn't a unified consciousness, that I actually had many different conscious selves, and they were all seemingly independent. I kind of felt it like birds of a different feather all in this cage together and not really getting along. And as I awoke, they came together, and they reluctantly or somewhat difficultly they fused themselves together, and then at a certain point I was fully awake and I was like, oh, I'm me again. But I had a memory of these many different personalities coming together. So I know viscerally this is true, and I decided after that, oh gosh, what used to be called multiple personality disorder, DID, that's not a diagnosis for the few. That's a collective condition. We all suffer from it. But we managed to paper over the cracks and unify these personae in a way that we don't notice, that we keep switching personalities. So that has come up this week, that I have a particular... Well, one of the sub-personalities that I know well is the one that I gave the most jurisdiction over my consciousness. And I called him the One, I called him Lucifer. I went full whole hog through psychedelic turbo boosting into a belief system that I was an avatar of Lucifer, whose task was to save the human energy field by bringing about, well, helping to bring about the destruction of blah blah blah. Anyway, you don't need to hear all the details. And I was quite effective. I wrote a book, got a book deal, made some money, made a movie, had people believing it, but as I said at the start, it ended up being a dead end. And I had to see over the years that what had happened was a traumatic fragment, or a fragment created by trauma, had put itself to the fore and said, I'll be this, I'll take care of this, I'll give you all you need to make this happen. And so it took something real and true, which was this felt sense of a deep divine mission in life, and it turned it into a spin-off from a big franchise movie, literally, Matrix Warrior, for those who know. So anyway, so this event happening today, as I said, happened right in the middle of me feeling that part pushing itself forward again and saying, yay, I'm going to get to be the one again, because, well, things are getting quite apocalyptic out there. And what I'm doing is connecting to people and becoming more and more, finding my rhythm to deliver what I have to deliver. But I can only do it from wholeness. I can't do it if I'm fractured or fragmented. And so this part has to come up so that I can see it for what it is and give it what it needs. I don't quite know how to finish that, because I might fall back on cliche, but it's a wounded little kid pretending to be Lucifer. I mean, there's so much in that, isn't there? I mean, maybe Lucifer was a wounded child too. He felt his father rejected him, right? And my family history is just written large like a Greek tragedy with these kinds of enactments. They're pretty persuasive. I mean, I could have got away with it if I hadn't had angels guiding me and coming to my help. Thank God. I could have got away with it. And I'd have been maybe very successful, but very, very unhappy, and I might, ended up like, well, I won't mention any names, but it's not a good fate. So the healing is well, that's going to happen in here on the inside. But things like this, opportunities like this, help because just naming something changes it. Just seeing something affects it, and well, I suppose, I mean, if I'm willing to let that part be seen and not try and hide it and not try hide behind it and not try and pretend, then I'm going to be more ready and able to let go of it, to not feel like I need it. Something like that anyway. I mean, it is working through me today. That was another thing I thought I might do right at the start. It was a kind of get out clause for me. I was going to say, watch me very, very carefully today and try and observe when I'm speaking from my mind and transmitting a slightly hellish sort of signal of distress, and when I'm communicating from my body and from a deeper part, because I'll be moving in and out. And yeah, so I was gonna bring that up because I thought, well, it could be disastrous. I might really just come a cropper. So that's a good way to at least turn it into an opportunity for people to observe something. But hopefully that makes sense in the context of the question. And is that if we let ourselves be seen in our forms of inauthenticity and our coping strategies, then well, we're rumbled, aren't we? But we'll also have the experience of, oh, well, it's really okay to let go of those coping strategies. A, because they don't work, right? They didn't protect me, and B, because I forgot what B was already. But I mean, I guess I don't need them because I don't need to be protected. I don't need to pretend to be something I'm not. I mean, we all have them. It's a strangely amorphous and kind of well, it's a strange subject because I'm talking about something that we all rely on to get by, and just to end up maybe that there's a phrase called a healing crisis, and that is that not that a crisis can bring about healing, although that's also true, but that when healing happens, it often precipitates a kind of crisis, and it's the way that we are in the crisis that allows for the healing, because the crisis is an echo of a formative crisis zone that we entered into as very young children, out of which those coping strategies emerged. So yeah, that was the too long don't read version, that for me to enter into this meet and a bunch of strangers, it's a mini crisis for me that has its threads or its roots in a massive formative crisis. So if I can relive it in a way that's gentle, loving and warm, then that wound is a little bit more healed by doing so.
Any shares, Kim?
Just wanted to share an image I had while you were talking. It was of a rushing river, and the only way across alive is a human chain. I saw an image of like a rushing river and a human chain, and that was the only way to cross. So I just shared that image in case it has any message for you.
Thank you, Kim. And that feels like the right way to close today's session. So I'll make some closing announcements tomorrow and talk about tomorrow's event. But I'm curious, Jason, do you have any parting words for us? I'm also curious how you're doing now and with your state, maybe compared to how you came in.
Oh, well, thank you for asking. I still have a bit of tummy ache, which I'm not sure where that comes from. Well, I mean, it was short. It was short and sweet. Over too soon. I'm very curious about some of these faces, and obviously, if I don't hear from anyone, then I just have to read the faces and try and feel if these are potential recruits for the human chain over the river Styx, because that's what we're looking for here. Yeah, I got thumbs up from Leslie, and that was actually the face I was thinking of. So my intuition must be working. I don't have parting words. I mean, that's talk about stage fright. If I have to think of some, great point to end on, then I'll just go into anxiety all over again. But I would like to just say that, as I already said, the reason I do this is to connect. And obviously, although we have connected, there's a potential for deepening connections, and that's the trajectory that I hope that I'm on. And so you're all invited to future events that I host. I can't invite you to today's events, but if I invite you to tomorrow's event, because that's same time tomorrow, I think Dave's doing an event. And I just hope that I will see more from you, from some of you. So, and you can just give me some feedback. That's always helpful. And you can email me, Jason with a U at protonmail.com, or you've got the links to my website anyway. So I'm not a hard guy to find. And I suppose if there was any summing up words, it would just have to do with get back to the land, get back to nature. That's where it's at, and that's really what I'm involved in now. Well, I am. I'm trying to fuse my online activities with my away from keyboards stuff, and it's happening little by little. But that is the trajectory here, as I say, out of the hell of the mind and into the body and back to earth, and by connecting to earth to rediscover, regain paradise, which maybe was never really lost. We just turned our backs on it. So that's the kind of microcosm of that, is that all of this online stuff for me has to be oriented away from the keyboard, away from the screens, and back to the land, to be remade in its image. There you go, I even had a wind up line. So happy to be here.
And I'll make some closing announcements in a moment. But Jason, thank you so much for coming to the Stoa today. A lovely session, and love to have you back. And you can check out more from Jason on the links I put in the chat. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube, they'll be on the video description. And as Jason mentioned, tomorrow we have his friend David Shana coming in for a session called Enlightenment Transmission, Experience First, Understand Later. And Dave, would you like to unmute yourself and kind of mention what we have in store for tomorrow?
Yeah, so can you hear me okay? Yeah, so I tried to sum up really quickly, and by summing up really quickly, you won't really get to see my character and personality as it's going to come out tomorrow. It's probably going to be quite funny and irreverent, and it will make people redefine what they think enlightenment is. It's going to take it out of the domain of seedy gurus and mind control spiritual leaders, and bring it down to earth in a non-intellectual, non-academic way, down in your guts and in your face kind of way. It's about experiencing. And my aim is to bring people into the realm of enlightenment without any hierarchy. And that's what we've been doing. And, Jason's part of that. And there's also someone else here today who's part of that. We regularly get together online every week, and we have support groups where people basically bare their soul. And Jason is an example of someone who's bears his soul every single day. Is that enough? Good. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Sounds like a very Stoa friendly event. So you can RSVP on the Stoa website, stoa.ca. It's also in the chat. So that being said, Jason, everyone, thank you so much for coming to Stoa today.